My son told the nurse to stop feeding me. Said I was too much to manage now. I heard it through the curtain, like I wasn't even human anymore. I was lying there, half-conscious, after a minor stroke. Tubes in my arm, mouth too dry to speak. But my ears worked just fine. He's had his time, David said. It's time we get control of the house. He didn't know I was listening. But in that moment, something in me withered. My boy, the one I raised with love, had thrown me away like an old jacket. You don't raise a child thinking he'll throw you away one day. You raise him believing you're shaping something good, someone kind. I held David in my arms the night Marjorie died. He was 12. Just a boy with damp cheeks and a trembling chin, clinging to my flannel like I could stop the world from spinning. And maybe I tried. From that moment on, I was mother and father, cook and coach, counselor and carpenter. I gave that boy every minute I had. We lived in the same old house I still call home. 2 bedrooms, cracked steps, a furnace that coughed more than it heated. But it was ours. Marjorie's rose bushes still grew along the fence, and her handwriting was on the pantry labels. David used to help me in the garden, well, more like he'd sit in the dirt and eat green beans raw, but he was happy. We both were, in our own quiet ways. I worked long shifts at the mill, then part-time at the gas station. My hands were always rough, my back always sore, but when David needed a new pair of cleats, I found a way. When he had his science fair, I stayed up all night painting that ridiculous volcano he forgot about until the night before. He got second place. We celebrated like it was the Nobel Prize. He used to call me Pops. Not Dad, not Father, just Pops. Said it sounded strong. Said it sounded like someone who didn't bend easy. He'd run home from school yelling, Pops. I got an A, or, Pops. Coach says I'm starting. And I'd always be there. Always clapping, always proud. Birthdays were just the 2 of us and a grocery store cake. He'd insist on writing "World's Best Pops" on it in crooked icing letters. I still have a photo of him at 15, grinning with braces, holding that cake like it was gold. We had traditions. Friday nights were grilled cheese and soup, eaten in front of the TV. Sundays were for church and then fishing, even if we didn't catch a thing. We'd sit by that pond, him swinging his legs, asking me questions about Mom. I never knew how to answer half of them. How do you explain grief to a kid when you barely understand it yourself? Still, we got by. Better than by, we had love. I thought that was enough. When David graduated high school, I cried. Not just a tear, either. Full on, shoulders shaking, embarrassing sobs in the gym bleachers. He hugged me afterward and said, "You did it, Pops. You got me here." No mention of his own hard work. Just that quiet, grateful look he used to give me when I fixed his bike or patched his jeans. He got a job at a small marketing firm, moved into an apartment across town. We still had Sunday dinner. He still called me with good news. Even when he met Lisa, it felt okay at first. She was sharp, driven, well-dressed. She laughed at my jokes, called me Mr. Harlan. I liked her. For a while. When they got married, David asked if I'd walk her down the aisle since her father had passed. I was honored. I remember holding her arm, seeing David's eyes tear up at the altar. I remember thinking, he's a man now. A good one. But slowly, quietly, something shifted. Calls came less often. Sunday dinners got cancelled more and more. They bought a new car, went on cruises, but forgot to invite me for Thanksgiving. I didn't complain. I didn't ask questions. I just waited. Because that's what fathers do, right? We wait. We forgive. We assume the best. Looking back now, I wonder if the distance had started even before Lisa. Maybe I'd missed it in the noise of life, the distractions of bills, work, old age creeping in. I remember one summer, before the real distance set in, when David helped me repaint the living room. He spent half the time on his phone, but he was there. At the end of the day, we sat on the porch, beers in hand, watching the sun fall behind the trees. He said, "I don't know how you did it, Pops. Raising me alone. I don't think I could have done what you did." I didn't know that'd be one of the last honest things he'd say to me. Because honesty fades when money starts whispering in people's ears. But in those good years, those real years, he loved me. I know he did. And I loved him with everything I had. That's what makes the betrayal so bitter. You can't be betrayed by someone you never trusted. You can only be betrayed by someone you once gave everything to. And God, I gave him everything. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about distance, it creeps in like rust, quiet and slow, until one day the whole structure starts to creak. I still remember the first time I noticed it. Lisa made a snide comment about the smell in my house. Something like, "It always smells like old paper and onions in here." David laughed. Not a big laugh, just a small chuckle, like he didn't want to upset her. But he didn't defend me either. It was subtle. At first, he started calling less. When I rang, he'd answer, but I could hear him typing, multitasking. I'd ask about his day, and he'd say, "Busy, Pops. Same old. Everything good on your end?" Then silence, waiting for me to wrap it up. I started shortening my stories, leaving out the little things. It didn't feel like there was room for them anymore. One Sunday I made his favorite, pot roast with carrots and potatoes. He texted 20 minutes before dinner and said they wouldn't make it. Lisa had a migraine and they'd try next week. That next week never came. The roast dried out in the oven and I ended up eating it cold, alone in the living room. At first, I told myself they were just busy. Newlyweds, new jobs, young lives. I made excuses for them like a fool. The worst part? I started changing myself to make things easier for them. I cleaned more, started wearing nicer clothes when they visited. I stopped telling old war stories. Lisa would always roll her eyes, and David would check his watch. One time, when I mentioned Marjorie, Lisa said, "You know, it's been over 20 years, right?" I just nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. They visited less, but when they did, it started to feel like inspections. Lisa would comment on the dust on the baseboards. David once asked if I had considered downsizing, said I didn't need all this space anymore. I laughed it off, said I liked the quiet. But I could feel it, the shift in their tone. It wasn't curiosity, it was calculation. Then came the money questions. At first, it was small. A loan for a new water heater. Help with a down payment on a car. Then came the business opportunity. David wanted to invest in a startup, needed $10,000. I told him I'd have to think about it. His tone changed immediately, cold, disappointed. "It's not like you're doing anything with it, Pops." I ended up giving him the money. Felt like I had to. I told myself he was still my boy. That he'd come around. But he didn't. The repayments never came. And when I brought it up once, gently, he sighed and said, "You said it was a gift. Are you keeping tabs on me now?" That one cut deep. I started keeping things to myself after that. I stopped mentioning my back pain, my high blood pressure, the dizzy spells. I didn't want to be more of a burden than I already seemed to be in their eyes. I could feel it, the way they looked at me. Not like family. Like responsibility. Like an old tree in the yard you're waiting to cut down. The hardest part was the grandkids. I loved those kids. Still do. But they started calling me Earl instead of Grandpa. Lisa insisted it was more modern. When I gave them old toys or books from the attic, she'd politely thank me and throw them in the trunk like trash. I once heard her say to David, "He needs to stop giving them junk. It's embarrassing." I started staying in my room when they visited. It was easier. Less chance of saying something weird or inappropriate. Less chance of being the problem. There were moments, though, when I'd see flashes of the old David. He'd carry in groceries, or help fix the fence without being asked. But then Lisa would pull him away, and he'd snap back into that distant version of himself. Power shifted quietly. One day, David offered to handle my bills, to make things easier. I agreed, grateful, really. My eyes weren't as sharp, and the computer always frustrated me. But then he started making decisions without telling me. Changed my insurance provider. Cancelled my newspaper subscription. Said it was wasteful. I felt myself shrinking in my own home. Neighbors noticed. My friend Ruth asked why David never stopped to chat anymore. "He used to call you every day, didn't he?" she said. I just nodded, too embarrassed to answer. What was I supposed to say? That the boy I raised had outgrown me like an old coat? One day I found a folder in the kitchen drawer, Lisa's handwriting on the label, Earl's house, planning. Inside were sketches, mood boards, contractor quotes. They had plans for the place. Renovations. An open-concept kitchen. A home gym. They even had fabric swatches. Nowhere in the folder was there a chair for me. That's when I stopped brushing it off. I stopped making excuses. I began to watch, really watch. Their body language. The way they spoke to me, not with me. Like I was fading from the picture, and they were just waiting for the frame to be empty. Something in my gut told me this wasn't neglect anymore. It was preparation. It was David's birthday. I still remember the date, September 8th. I had woken up early, baked him a carrot cake from scratch like I used to when he was a boy. Shredded the carrots myself, even though my fingers ached with every movement. I ironed my best shirt, the blue one Marjorie always liked, and brought out a photo album to give him. It was full of pictures he'd forgotten, him in overalls at age 4, Marjorie holding him in the hospital, our first Christmas after she passed. I thought, maybe it would remind him. They didn't pick me up for the party. I was told to take a rideshare. Lisa said it was easier that way. When I got there, I stood at the front door for a minute longer than I needed to, just listening. Laughter, music, clinking glasses. I knocked. Lisa opened the door, wine in hand, her smile stretched thin. "Oh, Earl. You made it," she said, like I was the mailman or a lost neighbor. I stepped in, cake in hand. The house looked like a magazine spread, string lights, catered food, elegant silverware. Strangers filled the room, mostly Lisa's friends and coworkers. David was at the back, laughing, surrounded by people. I walked toward him. He saw me. And I swear to you, his smile faded. Not in shock or excitement. In annoyance. Like I was a dog that wandered into a wedding. He gave me a quick hug, barely touching my back. "Didn't think you'd make it," he said. "You didn't invite me, David." "I invited myself." He didn't respond. I handed him the cake. He glanced at it, gave a weak smile. "Lisa already ordered one, but, thanks." He handed it off to someone else without even looking at it. I stood there, unsure what to do. No seat saved. No one greeted me. I wandered to a corner of the living room, watching my own son laugh with strangers while I sipped lukewarm punch from a paper cup. Then I saw it. On the wall, where my old war medals used to hang in our family home, now digitally displayed in a slideshow, they showed before and after renovation plans. A giant screen showing 3D mock-ups of my house. Our future vision, the title said. Photos of my backyard, my shed, Marjorie's rose bushes, were turned into a modern patio with a fire pit. My living room had been replaced with something sterile and white, filled with chrome furniture. There was even a voiceover, Lisa's voice, narrating how they planned to revitalize the property after transitioning Earl to care. Transitioning Earl. Like I was a piece of furniture being moved to storage. I walked out into the backyard, heart pounding, eyes stinging. Needed air. Needed space. A few minutes later, I heard voices. David and Lisa, on the porch, unaware I was still nearby. He looked confused, Lisa said, laughing. I told you we should have just waited until next week. I didn't think he'd come, David replied. Anyway, it's not like he'll remember most of this. Then a pause. Lisa's voice dropped. Do you think he'll sign the papers next week? David sighed. We'll tell him it's just to simplify things. He's too tired to argue these days. I stepped into the light. They both jumped. I may be tired, I said, voice steady, but I'm not blind. And I'm sure as hell not stupid. They froze. David started to speak. Pops. No, I cut in. Don't pops me. Not now. Lisa tried to laugh. You weren't supposed to see all that. It was just preliminary ideas. Preliminary, I repeated. For my house. While I'm still living in it. David's face flushed. We're just planning ahead. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal? My voice cracked. That's Marjorie's garden you're turning into a fire pit. That's my bedroom you're converting into a home office. And I'm still alive. Dad, he said, softer, we're just trying to prepare for when things get harder. You're not getting any younger. I laughed. Not because it was funny. But because it was all so absurd. So grotesque. You want to prepare? Here's some advice. Prepare for regret. I walked away. Left the party, the fake lights, the hollow music. I didn't say goodbye. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table. The photo album still in my hands. Still wrapped. I opened it. Looked at those old pictures, of a boy who once thought I was invincible. Of a man who had given everything to him. I cried until my throat hurt. But even through the grief, something inside me began to settle. This wasn't just a moment of hurt. It was a revelation. They didn't see me as family anymore. They saw me as real estate. And that, more than anything else, broke me. After the birthday party, I stopped reaching out. Not out of spite, but self-preservation. Something had shifted inside me, and it wasn't just hurt. It was clarity. A kind of quiet, bitter knowing that can only come after decades of giving and forgiving. I started paying closer attention. One evening, maybe 2 weeks after the party, I walked into the house after gardening and heard Lisa's voice echoing from the living room. I froze. The call was on speakerphone. She must have thought I was still outside. I just need a few more weeks, she said. We almost have him softened up. David's going to bring the power of attorney paperwork again this weekend. Once we get that signed, the rest is easy. A woman on the other end laughed. You're a saint for dealing with that place. All that old furniture and dusty junk. I'd go crazy. Well, it won't be ours forever, Lisa replied, almost proudly. Once Earl's in care, we'll gut the place. Flip it or rent it. We're sitting on a goldmine and he doesn't even know it. I stepped into the room. Lisa turned, startled. Her eyes darted to the phone. Earl, oh, I didn't hear you come in. I noticed, I said quietly. She scrambled to end the call, fumbling with the buttons. That was just a friend. We were talking about design ideas. I heard everything, I said. Don't lie. The silence between us was thick enough to choke on. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. For once, she had no script. Just a face flushed with guilt and something colder, resentment that she'd been caught. I left the room without another word and went upstairs. Locked my door. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the betrayal, by then, I was numb to it, but because I couldn't stop hearing Marjorie's voice. If they ever try to treat you like a burden, you remember who you are. She told me that years ago, when I got sick for the first time. She held my hand in that hospital room, eyes stern but soft. You're not just someone's father. You're a man who built a life with his bare hands. I'd almost forgotten that. The next day, David came by alone. Sat at the kitchen table with a folder in his hands. Inside were legal documents, medical power of attorney, financial authorization, even a blank will template. He smiled like a salesman. Pops, this is just to get ahead of things. Nothing urgent. Just standard stuff. Everyone does this nowadays. I stared at the papers. Then at him. You think I'm slipping, I said. You think I'm too slow to notice what's happening. David hesitated, then gave a half-laugh. Come on, don't be dramatic. This is just for convenience. You're still sharp. But you've had a few episodes, and we just want to help. I leaned forward. Help who, David? Me, or yourselves? His jaw tightened. I'm trying to make this easier on all of us. It's not like you need to manage your own bills at this point. You barely leave the house. You could be comfortable. You could have nurses, activities, meals delivered. In exchange for signing everything over. He didn't answer. I pushed the folder back toward him. No. David stood, his chair scraping loudly. You're being stubborn. You always have been. That's why Mom had to clean up after you all those years. It was the first time he'd thrown her into the fire with him. That shook me. Don't you dare bring her into this, I said, voice low. She gave her life for this family. And so did I. He scoffed, gathering the folder. We're done here. He walked out without saying goodbye. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. I walked through the house with my thoughts loud in my head. Every photo frame became a courtroom. Every memory, a piece of evidence. I thought about the years I spent building this place with Marjorie. How we laid the tile in the kitchen ourselves, laughing and cursing as we made mistakes. How we built David's bookshelf by hand when he was 10, each shelf crooked, but sturdy. I thought about the times I held him through night terrors, taught him how to drive, stayed up to stitch holes in his backpack so he wouldn't be embarrassed at school. And now? Now he wanted me to disappear quietly, to sign away my rights, my memories, my dignity. I started watching how they spoke around me, choosing words like, when, not, if. Lisa began leaving brochures on the counter for senior care facilities. One even had a sticky note, looks peaceful, with a smiley face. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But I started preparing. I gathered my documents. Took out the old deed, birth certificates, bank statements, even the dusty life insurance folder. I started a little notebook. Logged every conversation, every subtle threat, every disrespect. And I made a quiet promise to myself. They would not erase me. Not while I still had breath. Not while I still remembered who I was. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. The house was cold the morning I decided to confront him. Not just from the weather, though the windows whistled with wind, but from the weight of silence that had thickened between us. David hadn't called in days. Lisa hadn't visited in weeks. But their plans hung in the air like ghosts, whispering in corners, tugging at my peace. I made a pot of coffee, black and bitter, the way I used to drink it when I was working 12-hour shifts at the mill. Something about the ritual made me feel steady. I sat at the kitchen table and waited. David arrived just after noon, knocking twice before walking in like he always did. He didn't even remove his shoes. "Hey, Pops," he said, tone casual. Too casual. I didn't smile. I motioned to the chair across from me. "Sit." He hesitated. "What's up?" "Sit." He did. I slid a folder across the table, the same one he'd brought weeks ago, now filled with my notes. My handwriting, shaky but clear, filled the margins. "I've read every word," I said. 3 times. He glanced at the papers, then looked up. "Okay. So, you want me to hand you control of everything? My finances. My medical decisions. My home. And you think I won't notice what's missing?" He furrowed his brow. "What's missing?" "Any mention of my dignity. My voice. My say in how I live." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "You're twisting this, Dad. This is just what people do now. It's practical. Everyone our age is doing this with their parents." I stared at him. "You're not everyone. And I'm not just some man in a brochure." David shook his head. "You're making this harder than it has to be." "No," I said. "You are." He stood up, pacing. "I have a family to take care of. Lisa's stressed. The kids need space. We can't be running back and forth, checking on you every week. I never asked you to." He laughed bitterly. "No, but we have to. Because we don't know when something's going to happen." "You mean when I die?" He stopped pacing. The word hung heavy between us. "You said it, not me," he muttered. "And you're circling like a vulture," I said. "Planning renovations, whispering behind doors. Don't think I don't hear things, David." He tried to recover. "Look, maybe we didn't handle this perfectly. But it's not like we're doing anything wrong. It's not like we've taken anything. Yet." His jaw clenched. There was a long, sharp silence. Then he said something he would later regret, though he never apologized. "You can't live forever, Pops. Sooner or later, someone's going to have to deal with all this mess. Why not let it be us?" I looked him dead in the eyes. "Because you stopped seeing it as my home. You started seeing it as your investment." He turned and walked out. No goodbye. No slammed door. Just silence. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat back in my chair, feeling the tiredness seep into my bones. That afternoon, Henry came by. He was a Korean War vet like me, though he walked with a cane now and mostly spoke in short, measured sentences. He brought over some canned soup and sat with me on the porch. "You all right?" he asked. "Define all right." He chuckled. "Lisa's been asking around town. Said you might be declining. Wants folks to keep an eye out." "Did she now?" Henry nodded. "Don't let M take you for a fool, Earl. You're sharper than half the men at the lodge." That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for them to finish what they started. I wasn't going to be quietly erased, like chalk from a blackboard. I pulled out the old filing box from the closet, blew off the dust, and made some calls. Not angry calls. Careful ones. I asked Ruth from church if she still knew that lawyer her brother used. I asked Henry if he'd be willing to write a letter about my mental fitness. And then I called Ms. Patel, my late friend George's daughter. She'd become a respected attorney in town. Smart. Fierce. And most importantly, someone who didn't owe the Westons a thing. We met 2 days later at her office. I brought everything, every document, every note, every piece of mail I had saved. She listened, nodding, her expression unreadable. At the end, she said, "Mr. Harlan, this isn't just practical. It's necessary. If they're trying to manipulate you or force a hand, you need protection." She offered me tea. I declined. My throat was tight, my stomach sour. But my mind was clearer than it had been in months. "You ready to talk about a new will?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "Yes. But I want to do it on my terms." The world outside was shifting, faster, colder, harder. But in that room, across that desk, I reclaimed something I hadn't realized I'd lost. My voice. And I was going to use it. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Maybe it was just my hands, knotted now with age and years of labor. Or maybe it was the weight of what I was about to do. Either way, I paused before putting ink to paper. Ms. Patel sat across from me, quiet, respectful. She didn't rush me. She knew this wasn't just a transaction, it was a reckoning. "This doesn't mean you don't love him," she said gently. "I know," I replied. "But love isn't the same thing as trust." And trust, well, that was gone. We went over everything slowly. My assets weren't much, just the house, a modest savings account, a pension, and some old war bonds that had collected more dust than interest. But to Lisa and David, it was gold. Not because of sentimental value. Because it meant leverage. Freedom. A foot on the property ladder without the work. I had no illusions anymore. If I left things as they were, they'd bleed this place dry before my body was even cold. So we rewrote the will. David and Lisa were removed. Entirely. Instead, I named the local Veterans Foundation as my primary beneficiary. A place that helped men like me, forgotten, worn down, discarded. They would inherit the house, the land, the savings, everything. And there would be a clause. If the will is contested, I told Ms. Patel, every last cent goes to charity. No second chances. She looked at me over her glasses. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "Let them challenge it. Let them show the world who they really are." We added a letter, personal, handwritten. A final message to David. It wasn't cruel. I didn't want revenge. Just truth. "David. I loved you the moment I saw you. I still do. But love without respect is just pain in disguise. This house was never about walls or furniture, it was about roots. About family. And somewhere along the way, you forgot what that meant. If you're reading this, I'm gone. But know this, I didn't abandon you. You just stopped being my son long before I stopped being your father. Pops." I sealed it in an envelope and gave it to Ms. Patel. She'd hold on to it until the time came. When I left her office that day, the air felt different. Not lighter. Not happier. But still, different. Like I'd finally unclenched something that had been locked inside my chest for too long. I walked past the hardware store, the one where David used to help me pick out tools for weekend projects. I paused for a moment, watching fathers and sons laugh over drill bits and measuring tape. I thought of those Saturdays, how we'd spend hours building shelves or fixing the shed, and then sit on the porch with lemonade, dirty and proud. I wondered if David remembered those days. I did. Every one of them. I went home and sat in the living room. The same chair I'd had since Marjorie bought it secondhand. I looked around at the walls, photos of birthdays, holidays, family dinners. So many smiles that felt like lies now. Or maybe they weren't lies at the time. Maybe time had just worn them thin. The phone rang that evening. Lisa's voice chirped on the line. "Hey Earl, just checking in. You've been quiet. Everything okay? I could hear it beneath the sugar, nervousness. She knew something had changed. I'm fine, I said. Just taking care of some business. There was a pause. What kind of business? Estate planning. Longer pause. Well, if you need help, we're happy to. I don't. Click. That was it. No shouting. No accusations. Just clarity. The next day, I went to the shed and started sorting through my tools. Some I hadn't touched in years, but I cleaned them up anyway. I found David's old hammer, still had his initials scratched into the handle. I held it for a long time before placing it in the donation pile. I didn't need reminders anymore. From that moment forward, every drawer I cleaned, every paper I filed, every drawer I labeled, it wasn't just preparation. It was a reclamation. Of space. Of voice. Of worth. And though no one else knew it yet, the storm had passed. I wasn't powerless anymore. It happened on a Tuesday. That morning, I was sitting in the living room, sorting through a shoebox of old letters. Most were from Marjorie. She used to leave notes in my lunchbox when I worked long shifts. Simple things: don't forget to stretch your back. Come home safe, love. That woman could say more in 7 words than David and Lisa could in an entire dinner party. I was halfway through folding one when I heard tires on gravel. I looked out the window, David's SUV, Lisa in the passenger seat. Behind them, a moving van. I didn't panic. I stood slowly, walked to the door, and waited. David knocked once, then walked in without waiting. "Hey, Pops. We're here to help you pack up," he said. Lisa followed, glancing around the house like she was surveying an auction lot. "Didn't you get our message?" she asked. "We found a great assisted living place, only 10 minutes from here. They've got a wellness center, game nights, all that." I stared at them, hands steady at my sides. "No, I didn't get your message," I said. "And even if I had, I wouldn't have answered it." David stepped forward. "Come on, Dad. You can't keep living here by yourself. It's not safe. We've already talked to the director, they've got a room ready for you. And the movers are already paid for." He said it like he was doing me a favor. Like I should be grateful. Lisa added, "We've been more than patient. You've had time to think it over. But this house, honestly, it's too much for you." She motioned toward the hallway. "We'll just start with the bedrooms." I stepped in front of her. "You will not touch a single thing in this house." David rolled his eyes. "Don't be difficult, Pops. We're doing this for you." "No," I said, voice low but firm. "You're doing it for you." Lisa let out a small, exasperated laugh. "This is ridiculous. Earl, this is what's best for everyone." "No," I repeated. "It's what's best for you. You want the house. You want the land. You want to bury me alive and pretend it's kindness." David's voice rose. "You're being paranoid. You're sick. You need help." "I'm not sick," I snapped. "I'm not confused. I see exactly what this is." I walked past them, opened the drawer by the front door, and pulled out a file folder. "Here's what you don't know," I said, handing it to David. "The house isn't yours. The will is changed. You're not in it. And if you try to fight it, every cent goes to charity. It's done." He opened the folder, skimmed the top page, then looked at me like I'd slapped him. "What the hell is this?" "Exactly what it looks like." Lisa stepped in. "You can't do this. You don't even know what you're signing anymore. You're not of sound mind." "I've been evaluated," I said. 3 times. And the documents are notarized. Witnessed. Sealed. David's face turned red. He stepped toward me, but stopped himself. You really want to leave everything to strangers, he said, voice shaking. After everything we've done? What exactly have you done? I asked. Taken my trust? Mocked my age? Whispered about my death behind my back. You don't get to play the victim now. Lisa crossed her arms. Fine. Then rot in this house alone. I didn't flinch. Better than dying slowly under your roof. They stood there, silent. I could see it in David's eyes, he hadn't expected this. He thought I'd be too tired, too frail, too lonely to resist. But something inside me had hardened. I walked to the door and opened it. You can leave now. David lingered a moment, then stepped outside. Lisa followed without a word. The movers waited in the truck, unsure of what to do. David turned to me one last time. You'll regret this, Pops. I looked at him, really looked. Not as my son. But as a man I no longer knew. No, I said. You will. And I closed the door behind them. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, breathing hard. Not from exertion, but from release. Something had broken. Not just between us, but inside me. The grief I'd carried for months turned to something else. Something steadier. Resolve. I walked back into the living room. The letters still sat in the box, waiting patiently. I sat down, picked one up, and unfolded it slowly. Come home safe, love. I was home. And I was safe. Because I finally remembered who I was. A week after the moving truck incident, Lisa hosted a fundraiser at the country club. It was all over town, flyers at the grocery store, posts online, whispers at the diner. A beautiful evening for a beautiful cause, the posters read. Cancer research, or something like that. I don't doubt the cause was worthy, but I knew what the event really was. A stage. A performance. A chance for Lisa to dazzle the town and for David to shake hands with men in polished shoes who spoke in donations and favors. And I was not invited. I wasn't supposed to be there. But I went. Not out of vengeance, or bitterness. I went for clarity. I wore my old blazer. The one I'd worn to David's college graduation. The one Marjorie had always said made me look like a senator. I polished my shoes, combed my thinning hair, and packed a simple manila folder. Inside, the new will. Legal statements. A letter from my physician verifying my mental clarity. And, most damning of all, a USB drive with audio recordings I'd quietly made. Just 3. Lisa speaking freely on speakerphone. David mentioning when he's finally out of the way. Enough. I arrived just as the speeches started. I stood in the back, invisible among the crowd. Waiters passed by with little toothpicked appetizers and glasses of wine. Everything smelled like perfume and surface smiles. Lisa took the stage in a sequin dress, microphone in hand. She thanked donors. She made jokes. She talked about family values. And then, she pointed to David in the crowd. My husband and I have learned so much from caring for his elderly father. It's made us more compassionate. More focused on what matters. People clapped. That was my cue. I stepped forward, walking slowly but steadily toward the stage. People noticed, quietly at first. Then the whispering began. Lisa's smile faltered. David turned, and his face dropped the moment he saw me. Evening, I said, taking the mic from the stunned host beside her. Sorry for the interruption. I'll only take a few minutes. Lisa whispered, Earl, what are you doing? I ignored her. Looked straight into the crowd. My name is Earl Harlan. Most of you know me. I've lived in this town for over 70 years. Raised a son. Buried a wife. Paid my taxes. Built my house with my own 2 hands. And lately, I've been made to feel like none of that mattered. The room fell quiet. All eyes on me. I held up the folder. This is my updated will. It removes David Harlan and Lisa Harlan from any claim to my estate. If they try to fight it, the entirety of my assets will go to charity. Gasps. Some murmurs. And for those wondering why, well, I have proof. I reached into my pocket and held up the USB drive. On this are recordings of conversations in which my son and his wife discussed removing me from my home. Not out of concern, but convenience. Financial convenience. David stepped forward. "Pops, you don't want to do this here." I turned to him. "No, David. You didn't want me to have a voice anywhere. You thought I was too tired. Too old. Too easy to brush aside. But I raised you. I fed you when you were hungry. Held you when you were scared. And when your mother died, I gave you every last piece of what was left of me." My voice cracked. But I kept going. "And you repaid that with silence. With greed. With plans drawn behind my back like I was already dead." Lisa tried to speak. I held up my hand. "I'm done. I won't be part of your show anymore." I turned to the crowd once more. "Take from this what you will. I didn't come here to ruin a party. I came to reclaim my name. My dignity. My truth." I handed the microphone back and walked out. Slowly. With every eye in the room following me. No one stopped me. No one needed to. Because I had said what needed to be said. Back home, I sat in my chair, staring out the window. I didn't feel victorious. Just clean. Like something had been pulled out of me, like a thorn finally removed after months of festering. My phone buzzed, texts from people I hadn't heard from in years. Neighbors. Church friends. Even the local paper editor. But I didn't reply. I wasn't looking for applause. Just peace. Do you think the Father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The day after the fundraiser, the world went quiet. No knocks at the door. No calls. No texts from David. Not even Lisa's passive-aggressive voicemails. Just silence. I sat on the porch that morning, the same chair I'd fixed a dozen times over the years. The cushion sagged more than it used to, but it still held me. The wind rustled the trees just enough to fill the space where people's voices used to be. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't mind the quiet. The town, of course, had its own version of noise. I caught the stares at the grocery store, the half-smiles from folks who didn't know whether to congratulate me or pity me. Ruth from church brought over a casserole, potato and leek, just like Marjorie used to make, and left it on my doorstep with a sticky note. "You did the right thing, Earl. Call if you get lonely." Lonely. It's a strange word. Heavy, but sometimes misleading. Because I wasn't alone in the way people imagine. I wasn't surrounded by 4 blank walls and silence that echoed back at me. I had memories. Photographs. The whisper of Marjorie's voice still lingering in rooms she once filled with laughter. I walked the garden path she planted, pulling weeds slowly, one by one. My knees protested, but I didn't rush. That soil had held her hands once. It still smelled like her on rainy mornings. I went inside and flipped through old albums. Pictures of David as a toddler, smeared with chocolate, Marjorie in her apron, eyes tired but smiling, me in a flannel shirt, holding a crooked shelf David had helped me build. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just remembered. The silence wasn't absence anymore. It was space. And I had a lot of it now. Some days, it felt like a gift. Other days, like a sentence. The hardest part wasn't what I lost. It was accepting what I never really had. I had always believed, deep down, that David would come back to himself. That the boy who once hugged me after every Little League game was still inside the man who now stood in courtrooms and drew property lines across my memories. But the truth is, people don't always come back. Sometimes, they don't want to. And the love we carry for them doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. It becomes quieter. Sadder. But still there, tucked into the corners of our hearts like folded letters we're afraid to throw away. One afternoon, as I was fixing the back gate, Henry showed up. Walked up slowly with that cane of his, chewing on a toothpick like always. "You made the paper," he said, holding out a copy. Local veteran confronts son over inheritance dispute at fundraiser. They called me stoic. Said I spoke with clarity and conviction. Funny, I never felt like anything but a tired old man with shaking hands and a full heart. Henry sat with me on the porch for a while. Didn't say much. Just drank his coffee and watched the wind with me. "You miss him?" he finally asked. "Every day," I said. He nodded. "That's how you know you did your job." I didn't understand at first. He continued, "Only good fathers get their hearts broken like that. The bad ones, well, their kids walk away and nobody cares." We didn't talk much more after that. But those words stayed with me. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from David. From my grandson. The envelope was plain. No return address. Inside was a sheet of lined paper with childlike handwriting. "Dear Grandpa. I don't know what happened. Mom and Dad say you're mad at them. I hope you're not mad at me too. I miss your stories. I miss your pancakes. Can I come visit? Love, Benny." I held that letter like it was made of glass. Read it 3 times. Then folded it and placed it in the same box as Marjorie's old notes. No reply yet. I wasn't ready. But something in me softened. That night, I sat on the porch again, watching the stars come out one by one. I thought about forgiveness. About how it isn't a door you slam shut, but a window you crack open, just enough to let the light in. Maybe one day, Benny would walk through that door. Maybe not. But for now, I had the house. I had the garden. I had the quiet. And, for the first time in a long while, I had peace. The idea came to me while watching the local news. They were covering a story about a nearby shelter for veterans closing down, lack of funding, the anchor said. Some of the men would be relocated. Others weren't so lucky. I stared at the screen long after the segment ended. The camera had zoomed in on one man, maybe in his 60s, clutching a garbage bag of clothes, standing outside with nowhere to go. His eyes looked tired. Not just from age, but from being forgotten. Something stirred in me. That house, my house, was too quiet. Too big for one man and too full of memories to leave to rot. Maybe it didn't need to be quiet anymore. I called Ms. Patel the next morning. Asked her what it would take to convert the property, legally, financially, logistically. A place for veterans. Older ones like me. Maybe a few struggling to get back on their feet. She didn't hesitate. "I'll look into zoning and nonprofit registration," she said. "If you're serious, Mr. Harlan, we can make this happen." I was serious. For the first time in years, I had a reason to get up with purpose. I started walking room to room with a notebook, sketching plans. The guest room would be perfect for a reading space. The basement, once David's playroom, could be turned into storage or even a laundry area. I made a checklist for repairs. The stairs needed reinforcing. The roof, God help me, was going to cost a fortune. But I wasn't afraid of the work. I welcomed it. Clara, a retired nurse I'd known from church, caught wind of the plan after I asked her about medical equipment sourcing. "You're turning your home into a shelter?" she asked, eyes wide with disbelief. "Not a shelter," I said. "A place to heal." Within a week, she was helping me sort medical supplies and plan logistics. "You'll need safety rails in the hallways. Accessible bathrooms. Meal plans." "I was thinking chili and cornbread," I said. She laughed. "Well, then you'll need a fire extinguisher too." Word spread faster than I expected. Henry brought over extra furniture. Ruth came by with spare linens. Even a few old friends I hadn't seen in years showed up one morning with tools in hand and thermoses full of coffee. We were building something, not just with nails and paint, but with purpose. Each night, I'd fall asleep exhausted but content. My dreams were no longer haunted by silence or betrayal, but filled with noise again. The good kind. Laughter in the kitchen. Boots on the porch. Stories swapped between men who understood pain in a language few others could. One morning while repainting the back fence, I found Marjorie's old wind chime in the shed. Bent a little, rusted in places, but still intact. I cleaned it, hung it back under the eaves. When the wind blew through it that evening, it sang softly. Like a whisper from her. "You're doing all right, Earl." Sometimes, I talked to her out loud. "I wish you were here to see it," I'd say, looking at her photo on the mantel. I imagined her smiling. Wiping her hands on her apron. Saying, "Well, make sure they take their boots off before they come in." I didn't know how long I had left, none of us do. But I knew what I wanted those days to be filled with. Not silence. Not bitterness. But life. Real, messy, meaningful life. David hadn't called. Lisa neither. And that was fine. I no longer lived with one foot in their world. I had stepped fully into my own. A world where the house Marjorie and I built wouldn't become some showroom or Airbnb. It would become a home again, for men like me. Men who had been soldiers, brothers, husbands, and now, just needed somewhere to feel seen. One evening, I sat on the porch, covered in sawdust, sipping lemonade. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting golden light across the lawn. A pickup truck pulled up. Clara stepped out, followed by a young man in a faded army jacket. "This is Jesse," she said. "He just got out last month. Nowhere to stay." The young man looked nervous, eyes darting. "You fought?" I asked him. He nodded. "Iraq. Twice." I stood, walked down the steps, and shook his hand. "Well, Jesse," I said. "You're home now." He didn't say much. Just nodded again, eyes wet. I showed him to the guest room. That night, after the lights were off and the house quieted again, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The floor creaked in the same spot it always had, just like when David was a boy sneaking snacks past bedtime. But it wasn't David. And that was okay. Because I had a new purpose now. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel alone. The house filled up faster than I expected. Within a month, we had 3 veterans staying under my roof: Jesse, who barely spoke above a whisper but always offered to do the dishes; Marvin, a Gulf War vet with a limp and a sense of humor sharper than any blade; and Pete, the oldest of the bunch, pushing 70, who insisted on waking up at 5 a.m. every morning to make coffee for everyone. Clara helped turn the dining room into a shared space, full of mismatched chairs, soft lighting, and shelves filled with donated books. We kept the record player spinning old country albums. Marjorie would have loved that. Each night felt like coming home from a war I didn't know I'd been fighting. No more pretending. No more walking on eggshells around Lisa's expectations or David's quiet judgment. Just real people. Real conversations. Real warmth. We talked about everything: boot camp, heartbreak, family we missed, dreams we used to have. And no one rolled their eyes when I told a story for the second or third time. They listened. Because they knew. They understood that some memories need to be spoken aloud just to stay real. Jesse fixed the squeaky porch step one afternoon. Didn't ask, just noticed and got to work. When I thanked him, he shrugged and said, "You let me stay here. Least I can do." Marvin started planting tomatoes in Marjorie's garden bed. Said he didn't know a thing about flowers, but his grandma used to grow vegetables, and the smell of soil helped him sleep. Even Pete, quiet and serious as he was, started leaving handwritten notes around the house, reminders, grocery lists, even the occasional joke. It felt like family. Not blood. Not obligation. But choice. Chosen family. The kind that shows up not because they have to, but because they want to. One morning, I was folding laundry when I saw a familiar shape outside the window. A small figure, hesitating by the gate. Benny. My grandson. He was holding something. A book, I think. I stepped outside slowly, unsure if he'd run off. He turned, saw me, and smiled, small, shy. "I wrote a story for school," he said. "It's about my grandpa. Can I show you?" I nodded, throat too tight to speak. We sat on the porch. He read aloud. It was simple, about fishing, pancakes, and a man who could fix anything with just his hands and a screwdriver. "He sounds like a good man," I said quietly when he finished. "He is," Benny said. "I hope he's not mad at me." I looked at him carefully. His eyes were like David's at that age, full of wonder, full of questions he didn't know how to ask. "I'm not mad," I said. "Not at you." He stayed for dinner that night. The others welcomed him without question. Marvin taught him how to shuffle cards. Pete let him feed the cat he'd adopted from a nearby shelter. Jesse showed him how to patch a hole in drywall. Benny was fascinated. Later that night, as I tucked an old quilt around him on the couch, he looked up and asked, "Are they coming too?" "Who?" "Dad and Mom." I paused. "I don't know," I said truthfully. He nodded. Didn't press. Just rolled over and pulled the blanket tighter. I sat by the fireplace long after he'd fallen asleep. That night, I wrote Marjorie a letter. First one in years. "Dear Marjorie. The house is full again. Not with who we expected, but maybe with who we needed. They're good men. Honest. Tired, like me. But still trying. And Benny, he's still got that spark. Like David did when he was young. I hope you'd be proud of what this place has become. I think you would be. I miss you every day. But I think I finally understand what you meant about letting go of old dreams to make room for new ones. Love always. Earl." The next morning, Benny helped me make pancakes for the house. Clara set the table. Pete made coffee. Jesse read the headlines. Marvin told another story about his grandma's tomato garden and swore it was haunted. And for the first time, it truly felt like home again. Real family. Not the one I lost. But the one I chose. It was a rainy Thursday when I saw his car again. I recognized the sound of that engine before I ever saw the headlights pull into the gravel. Funny how some things stick with you. The door creaked open, then shut gently. No slamming this time. David stood at the gate, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders hunched, not from the rain, I think, but from the weight of what he came to say. I didn't move from the porch. Just watched. He didn't speak right away. Just stared at the house like it had changed into something he didn't recognize. "I heard from Benny," he finally said. "He told me you made pancakes." I nodded. "Every Sunday now." He let out a small breath. "He really likes being here." I waited. "I wasn't sure if I should come," he added. "Lisa doesn't know I'm here." I didn't respond to that. I didn't want to talk about Lisa. I guess. I came to say I didn't expect it to end this way. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "I never wanted it to end at all," I said quietly. "But you made choices, David." "So did I." He winced a little, like the words hit something soft. "I messed up," he said. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting our future." "No," I said, "you were trying to secure yours. And there's a difference." He sat on the steps below me, soaking wet now. Didn't seem to care. "I keep thinking about when I was a kid," he said, voice shaking. "You used to say we were a team. That it was just you and me against the world." I swallowed hard. "I meant it." "I know," he whispered. "That's what makes this worse." For a long while, we just sat there. Rain tapping on the roof. Wind moving the chimes above us. I didn't know if this was an apology or a goodbye. Maybe it didn't need to be either. He finally looked up. "Do you hate me?" I shook my head slowly. "No. But I don't trust you. Not yet. Maybe not again." He nodded. "Accepted it." "I'm not here to take anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know. I see it now. What I did. What I became. It's not who I wanted to be." "You became a man who saw his father as a transaction," I said. "And that breaks something you can't always glue back together." He looked down at his hands, then up at the window where Benny was watching silently behind the curtain. He smiled, small, sad. "Can I see him?" "You already did," I said. "He's watching." David waved gently. Benny waved back. "I'm sorry, Pops." I sighed. "I know." He stood slowly, rain still running down his collar. "I'll go now," he said. And he did. No hugs. No promises. Just a quiet step back into the storm. I sat there a while longer after he left, letting the moment settle into the porch wood, into the folds of my coat. Benny came out and sat beside me. "That was Dad," he said. "Yeah. Is he coming back?" I looked out at the road where the car had disappeared. "I don't know," I said. "But he came today. That's something. And maybe that's all it ever is in the end. Small things. A visit. A quiet moment. A look in the eyes that says, 'I know I failed you.' It doesn't fix everything. But it makes room for something different. Not forgiveness, maybe. But dignity. Would you have forgiven your child in this situation? Let us know in the comments. The ribbon wasn't anything fancy, just a length of red twine from the hardware store. Clara tied it herself that morning, hands trembling slightly from arthritis, but still graceful. We fastened it across the porch railings, right where the front steps begin. Henry stood beside me, holding the scissors. The others, Jesse, Marvin, Pete, even a few neighbors, formed a small crowd on the lawn. Benny stood at my side, bouncing slightly on the balls of his feet, nervous energy written all over his young face. "This is the grand opening," he whispered. "Sure is," I said. "No cameras. No press. Just the people who matter." The official name was painted on a wooden sign Marvin had carved himself, Marjorie's House, a home for veterans. We called it that not because she served, but because she served in the quiet ways, the way women of her time did. With meals, with patience, with a love that held things together when everything else was falling apart. And because, in some ways, she was the foundation this place stood on. Henry handed me the scissors. "You say something," he whispered. "She was your girl." I cleared my throat and looked out over the crowd. "I'm not much for speeches," I said. "Never have been. But this house, this place, was built on love. And for a while, I thought I'd lost that. I thought it got buried under resentment and silence." I paused, eyes flicking briefly to the back row, where I saw a familiar figure standing just outside the circle of chairs. David. Not with Lisa. Not holding a phone. Just him, hands in his coat pockets again. I didn't acknowledge him. Not with words. But I didn't turn away either. I continued, voice steadier now. But then new voices came. People who didn't share my name, but shared my pain. Shared my need for a home that didn't just have walls, but warmth. Laughter. Forgiveness, even when it wasn't deserved. I glanced down at Benny, who beamed up at me. "This is Marjorie's house," I said. "But it belongs to all of us now." With that, I cut the ribbon. The small crowd clapped, not loud or wild. Just genuine, honest applause from people who understood the weight of the moment. Inside, we served chili and cornbread like always. Pete insisted on leading Grace, which turned into a speech about mashed potatoes and trench humor that had us all laughing. Jesse played his harmonica. Marvin told a story about a dog he once smuggled through basic training. And Benny? Benny sat at the piano in the corner, plunking out the beginnings of a song. Said he was writing something about the house. Said it might take years, but he'd finish it someday. David didn't stay long. He slipped in after the ribbon was cut, stood quietly in the hallway for most of the gathering, then left without a word. But before he did, I found a note on the kitchen table in his handwriting. "Pops. I won't ask for forgiveness. I know I have a long way to go. But I see it now. You didn't just build a house. You built a legacy. I'll try to honor it, even if I don't deserve a place in it. David." I folded the note and tucked it into Marjorie's old recipe box. Right between her chili instructions and her gingerbread cookie recipe. That night, when everyone had gone to bed, I sat out on the porch alone. The wind was cool. The trees whispered like old friends. I looked out at the lawn, the windows glowing with soft light, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not victory. Not even pride. Just belonging. The house no longer echoed with absence. It pulsed with life. With people who had been through their own wars, on battlefields, in families, in their own heads, and chose to keep going anyway. This house had seen joy and grief, betrayal and redemption. Now, it saw hope. I leaned back in the rocking chair, Marjorie's wind chime singing above me. "Good night, love," I whispered. And for the first time in years, I felt her whisper back.